Welcome back, everybody, to the Retro Blood. As we start off a brand new month, here in the month of April of 2025, and we are doing Alison's picks for this whole month because we are exploring 1980s ghost stories. That's right, the ghost that can haunt you through your dreams, haunt you through your houses, haunt you through different places, because we're talking about the spirits that will not leave this realm, who are stuck in eternity, trying to find their way back home, or trying to just haunt you for no good reason, because that's what they like to do. Up first, if y'all like long 1988 Disney style PG-13 movies with a very dark twist with them. If y'all like a kid trying to solve a murder mystery, alright, while he has a bunch of faded ghosts flying around everywhere, alright, and if y'all like 1920s drama, then this is the little story for you. Because the first Alison's pick that we're doing for this month is Lady in the White. J.H. Alison, James Kline. What's happening, Alison? How's it going with this 1988 Disney fairy tale style story?
Why do you say it's 1920s? This takes place in 1962.
Oh, I said 20s? My bad. I'm at 1960s. Well, he could have been in 20s. You know what I mean?
So I don't know. So, okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll find out at the end, but apparently, it's from the sound of your tone, you didn't like this movie as well as I thought you would. So,
well, actually, that's not true. I liked parts of it. It was just a weird one because, so at first I'm watching the movie, right? And I'm like, okay, this reminds me of like, if I was like a kid, you know what I mean? I really like this movie. You know what I mean? You got a ghost. You got some Halloween, 1980s Halloween stuff going on.
Right.
You know what I mean? We got a kid out there solving mysteries. That's why I'm wearing my Goosebumps shirt, brother. It reminded me of like a big Goosebump episode.
So, it's kind of it's dark.
But it did have. Now, this movie was weird because it had all that like kids, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark style acting. You know what I mean? But it had like a dark undertone to it, with a child murderer in the town for decades. This is the 60s, so we're having a lot of racial tones to the film too. So it was an interesting one. Like, as an adult now, the story wasn't hitting me a whole lot because it did kind of remind me of like those kids, like E.T. You know what I mean? I'll talk about like that kid feel to it, but it's weird because it was like a kid field movie. Like it kind of felt like you could have your kids watch this but like not really because of the dark undertones. So it's really weird. It's a really interesting balance that they were doing for this movie, I thought.
Well, yeah, I mean it's PG-13, so it's one of the early PG-13 movies. So it's not super graphic. Yeah. And I do realize we just came off of doing a movie that had a mummified baby and corpse fucking in it. So anything beyond that's going to be more tame. But I love this movie. I feel like I see what you're saying. It's not that long. It's like an hour and 50 minutes, or it's like right at 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours. Yeah.
So, but it's longer than most movies that we do on this show. Mm-hmm. I mean, usually, and I've been known on the show to say that a horror movie should be about 90 minutes. It really shouldn't be longer than that. This movie does get a little long. I feel like it takes a long time to get started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the first hour is kind of building up, and then but after when that first hour hits, though, I think the movie gets really good. It's one of those things where you really need to watch it in one sitting. Which honestly, in most cases, I would recommend watching any movie in one sitting because that's how it's intended to be watched. For the show, I tend to break movies up and watch a little bit, and then watch a little bit more, and watch a little bit more because it helps me. If I could do it the right way, it helps me take notes and remember more of it in some ways.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it doesn't, but in a lot of ways it does. But I think if you watch this movie all the way through at one time, it's a lot better. But I don't know. I really like this movie, and I thought you would like it better than it sounds like you did. So we'll see.
No, I mean, like I said, I like some of it.
It is a little bit. It is a little bit. I wouldn't call it a kids movie, but you're right. It's like it feels like a kids movie.
Yeah.
But it's so dark that it's not really a kids movie.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's like I said, like it's kind of like I mean, basically, it's the stories remind me at first of something you would see like, you know, and Are You Afraid of the Dark, or like Goosebumps a little bit, you know, with the ghost and you know, but the actual like tone of it, like the reason there is ghost and the reason there is like this stuff happening is because we get basically out like this Freddy Krueger killer. All right,
a child murderer.
Child murderer. Okay.
It's about a serial killer, yeah.
And we find out like it was just weird because I can't really explain it. It's basically like a lot of the tone of the film, okay, was like a kids movie, a kids horror movie. But it's not because of the actual subject that they're showing. So it was really interesting. I actually thought that part was really interesting about the film. But of course, we'll break it all down.
We will, yeah. And I'll have more to say about this later. There's no point in talking about it now. I'll talk about it at the end if I can remember about how I feel about, like, you know, my thoughts on what you're saying. But I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I think you're accurate. But yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about it more as we get there.
Yeah, and I gotta see too. Did you pick this one out? Like, was this a big childhood film of yours, or you just liked it?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
The year this movie came out was a really pivotal year for me. And I remember specifically renting this movie repeatedly at the video store. Like, I would just rent it all the time. I loved this movie in 1988.
Yeah.
And I just watched it all the time. I thought the movie was fantastic. I loved the ghost idea. I love the serial killer idea. Like, it was just dark enough to not be real scary, but it was, I mean, you know, although I wasn't a little kid in 1988, but, you know, I was like 14 or something, or 12 or 13 or something like that.
This is a good movie for them, like a 14, 15-year-old.
But but it's a good teenage horror movie. It's kind of like Poltergeist. Poltergeist is a good gateway horror movie, I think. And like Goosebumps and stuff like that didn't exist, so we didn't really have kid horror then. That wasn't like a thing. Yeah. So like this was a movie that a kid could watch. Plus, I feel like kids' movies in the 80s were way scarier than they are now.
Well, like, yeah, because they could do a little bit more. Like, here's a good example. So, have you ever seen that movie Clue? From like 19... That shit is like a PG movie. That movie is not PG. If that came out like nowadays, that would almost be like rated R. Okay?
Right. And that's one of the things that I've talked about before. Like, people are way more conservative now than they used to be. Yeah. Because it's the opposite of the way people think it is. Like, people used to think that, oh, back then people were just wild and crazy, and they weren't. Or, you know, they were there, or like that people were saying back then people were way more conservative, and now people are wild and crazy, and it's not. People are way more conservative than they used to be. Yeah. Like, if you made a movie like The Dark Crystal today, you know, like that movie, the Jim Henson movie. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but if you made that movie today for children, people would shit their pants. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was just a normal kids movie back then. Yeah. And this is kind of similar. So I think this is intended to be like a young adult horror movie, except it's also about child murder, which is weird.
Well, you know, they're just, I think just the tone of like the 80s, even for kids movies, is a little bit more adult nowadays. Right. Yeah. Like, they could bring up like child murders and, you know, racial stuff. Yeah. Like, you know, nowadays, and it's you know, and in the 80s, because it's just like a different time. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, it was a very different time.
Like we talk about, that's one of the fun things about doing this show is not only like, you know, finding cool and fun horror movies, but also seeing what the time was like for films and how they're different compared to now. And I think the biggest difference between now, you know, horror movies in the 80s and now is the dialogue in between the scenes. You know what I mean? It's way different of how the actors talk and get to the point compared to how they do it now. So it's pretty interesting. But we'll talk all about it.
We'll get more about that, yeah.
We'll break everything down for everybody here. because we're starting up this month with some Ghost. But before we get into some Ghost, let's get into the weekly history segment of what was going on in the world of pro wrestling and the metal music around the release date of Lady in the White, which was April 22nd, 1988. So we're going to the later parts of the 80s. Mm-hmm. All right. So we have a lot going on. There's a couple little, there's actually a lot of stuff going on in wrestling right now. One of the biggest things is we had a Saturday night main event taping around this time. That's all, which I believe during this era, it wasn't necessarily on Saturdays. It was just called like the main event. So sometimes like it would air on Saturdays, but then sometimes it would air on like Fridays or Sundays. Mm-hmm. So this one we had Randy Savage and him retaining his WWF World Championship against the One Man Gang.
Oh,
on Saturday night.
That would have been a good match.
Oh yeah. But that's not the biggest thing I want to talk about. The biggest thing I want to talk about is for Crockett.
Okay.
We are entering the annual Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup tournament, which is always a fun tag team tournament that's going on. And we'd actually see the around this time, there's a couple things going on around Crockett during this time. First, we have the big storyline of the Midnight Rider. All right.
Who is Dusty Rhodes?
Basically Dusty Rhodes under a mask.
Yeah. Because you would never figure that out.
Yeah.
Right? And you'd never figure out that it's Dusty Rhodes.
Well, I mean, that was a running joke. Like, everybody pretty much knew it was, but they just pretended like it wasn't. And he had his manager, Magnum TA, out there. All right. And he's actually building up to a match with Al Perez. So that's a kind of a fun one. And also during this time, and we talked about this before on the show, around this month period too, this is also when Barry Windham turned on Lex Luger to join the Four Horsemen. All right. That happened around this time as well. And this is why we would see Sting and Lex Luger team up for the Crockett tournament. So a lot of stuff going on in the world of pro wrestling around this time.
I do have a question about that. Do you know, off the top of your head, the storyline of why Dusty Rhodes was the Midnight Rider during this time?
I believe
storyline wise.
So I don't know all the details, but I believe basically he lost a match where he would have to be like suspended for a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of the Four Horsemen and Tully Blanchard. Like they kind of like they did like a somehow Dusty Rhodes got suspended for a year and he couldn't come in. So that's when he came in under a mask as the Midnight Rider and got his revenge of the Four Horsemen that way. So he wasn't technically Dusty Rhodes coming in. It was a whole new guy. Right. Obviously, it was Dusty Rhodes, and everybody at the time knew it was Dusty Rhodes, and they wanted to unmask him to show the world that that's really Dusty Rhodes under the mask.
So I wonder, the reason I asked that question is because I wonder if they got that idea, or if this had been done many times before, or if they got the idea for this storyline from the Mid-South storyline with Junkyard Dog, where he was Stagger Lee.
All right, probably.
Because Junkyard was suspended for a year.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a masked wrestler closely resembling Junkyard Dog's physique just happened to show up under a mask under the name Stagger Lee and then wreaked havoc for a year until Dog came back. But I wonder if they got that idea from that, because that was like in 1982, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure they did. Because, at this time, this is when Crockett, they actually had a lot of people from Mid-South. I think, like, Mid-South at the time was gone because I think Mid-South turned into the USWA. And then Crockett, like, formed with the USWA because that's how they got Sting. That's how they got Jim Ross. You know what I mean? That's how they got a bunch of people from there. So, yeah, they probably just reused that storyline.
And there was territory, and like we've talked about before, it was territory. So nobody had seen that story in Crockett territory yet.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So they could just do the story again. Yeah. And they're both named after songs. Stagger Lee was an old 50s song, and Midnight Rider is an Allman Brothers song.
Yeah, very similar storylines. Pretty cool.
I love that idea. I wonder if they could pull that off today. Well, WWE's kind of doing it right now with the Grande Americano or whatever it is.
I mean, like he's not as popular. So it's kind of like it's a heel doing it. But they are kind of doing that. Well, the problem is Chad Gable, he wasn't suspended. He just didn't know how to beat luchadors. So it's like it's kind of like the same realm, but it's different.
Yeah. But I wonder if you could do it with a suspended wrestler. Would the audience buy it today, or would they just think it's a joke? Because obviously the Chad Gable thing is supposed to be a joke.
Yeah. The last time I remember them doing that is with Hulk Hogan. When Vince McMahon fired Hulk Hogan or something like that, then he came back as Mr. America. That was like in the 2000s.
Oh, yeah. But that's also funny, too. That was also kind of a joke, too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Of course, I don't know how people took it then. I'd like to talk to somebody that watched this if they thought it was funny or if they, I mean, surely, like, no one is dumb enough to be convinced that this wasn't Dusty Rhodes, right? Like, nobody in the audience was truly that stupid, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of interested in how people would take it then. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. I love like when people who don't wrestle under masks come back under a mask. I think it's just a cool idea.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Kind of reinvent yourself, do a fun little character. Nowadays, it's mostly about toys. So if they do that, but back in the day, it's just kind of a cool little hidden angle to do that's kind of fun for the audience. Yeah. But Alison, what are we going to be listening to on our way to I guess this was in theaters, right? This Lady in the White?
This was a pretty major released movie. So yes, this was a big deal. I mean, it didn't turn out to be a big deal. It was a flop, but it was a major. It played in actual theaters though.
Yes.
As opposed to like all the movies we did last month. But anyway,
the $1 backwoods fucking grindhouse, I guess they were in.
I guess so, yeah. Anyway, so as I'd said before, excuse me, I'll clear my throat. As I'd said before, 1988 was a pivotal year for me. Like I was coming out of like being a little kid into like trying to learn how to be a teenager. And I was starting to discover new things. Like I was discovering new music. Before around 87, 88, I was really listening to whatever my cousins listened to. Like I've talked about that before, like the metal my cousins listened to and AC/DC and stuff like that. 87, I discovered punk rock for the first time around that time. And then in 1988, my new favorite band was Rush.
Oh, Rush. There you go.
So I discovered Rush. They had just released their album Hold Your Fire the year before. It is not what I thought it would sound like. When it was recommended to me, I was recommended to me because they said it sounded like Pink Floyd. And I loved Pink Floyd. Yeah. So I went to the local Roses with my saved up lunch money, and I bought Hold Your Fire on cassette. And at first, I didn't like it at all. I'm like, this does not sound anything like Pink Floyd. I could see how earlier Rush people might think that. But this was like in their kind of in an era where they were like moving. They were still real synthesizer heavy, but they were kind of moving out of that. And it was more like mainstream rock sounding. Like it wasn't heavy, but it wasn't synthesizer either. They were kind of in an in-between space. I like this album now because it was like the first Rush record I ever listened to. But I told that story to tell this one. So the weekend that this movie came out, Rush was in Birmingham, England at the National Exhibition Center, and they were filming a movie as well. So they made this movie called A Show of Hands, which was a concert movie, and they were scheduled to play 3 nights in Birmingham to film this movie because back then you would usually film a movie when you had 2 or 3 nights in the same city, so that you could leave all your stuff set up and then you could get the best cuts of the film in case anything messed up. So April 21st, 23rd, and 24th, they were playing in Birmingham. So conceivably, we could have gone to see Rush on the 21st, saw this movie on the 22nd, and then saw Rush the 23rd and 24th again.
Oh, there you go. That'd been something.
So that would have been a kind of cool weekend. But like I was looking up the set list, which I couldn't find the definite set list from this show. Like I said, they did film it, so you can watch it. It's called A Show of Hands, and it's on YouTube, I think. You can buy it on DVD, but I believe it's on YouTube as well. But I looked it up in the book Rush, Wandering the Face of the Earth, which is about a touring history of Rush. But yeah, they opened with Big Money, went straight into Subdivisions, then Limelight and Marathon, which are all great songs. Like those are all classic Rush songs. And then near the end, they finished with their classic 2112 from their 2112 album, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
They played Tom Sawyer. They played Spirit of Radio. They played all the hits, YYZ. They played everything. So this is a really good era for Rush live. Like, I feel like even though the albums weren't as good as some of the ones they had been making or would make a few years later, this was a really good era for Rush live, and they were playing really good shows. And Show of Hands is a really good example of that if anybody wants to check it out. But it's a really good film. It's a really good soundtrack. Rush is a really good band. So, yeah. And Hold Your Fire is a good album. So you should check it out.
When they were touring, did they play the same songs every day?
So, kind of.
Like with that 4 days in a row?
Yes. They probably did play those. I would say they played the same set 3 nights in a row.
Okay.
Although later on they wouldn't. So Rush is a weird band because they're like one of those bands where they have a show, right? Like you're watching a performance that's synced with video and things like that. So it has to kind of be the same, but they switch out. Often will switch out 2 or 3 songs every night. So like they'll play the same set but they'll take 3 songs out and put 3 other songs in. So yes and no. So I have a feeling with these 3 shows, they probably played the same set all 3 nights because they were filming. But ordinarily Rush would switch it up a little bit sometimes. And they would have basically 2 programmed shows and they would either do one or the other. But yeah, so basically I have a feeling in these particular shows, they would play the same set all 3 nights because they were filming, but ordinarily, no, they would switch it up a little bit for the 3 different nights because they know Rush knows that their fans are fanatics. They're cultists and they will go to every show. I mean, I saw my first Rush show in 1990. And then I saw the last one at Rush 40, which was 2015. And I probably saw Rush 30 times.
Nice.
I don't know. I'd have to count, but I saw every Rush tour between 1990 and the end. And I probably saw them 25, 30 times. So I would go as often as I could go see them, even if they played the same show.
Yeah.
But yeah, check it out, guys, if you get a chance. It's called A Show of Hands. You can buy it on DVD or you can watch it on the YouTubes, I believe. But yeah, good stuff.
Everybody check it out. We'll play a little bit at the end of the show, some Rush stuff. But yeah, at the time, that's a very, I always remember the Drush being known for their drummer.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Neil Peart's is one of the best drummers of all time.
Yeah. So they definitely know how to play their gimmicks.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of gimmicks, let's get into who booked this shit.
Who booked this shit?
Why was this thing made? Lady in the White. All right. So this was written and scored by one Frank Luger. How do you say his name?
So actually, I don't know how to say this guy's name, but he's Italian. So I think it's La Loggia.
La Loggia.
I'm pretty sure if you have the same, there's someone out there that's going to kill us for this because I really do not know. But someone out there Italian can correct us. But I believe if you have 2 consonants together, it's like a j sound.
Yeah.
So it's La Loggia.
La Loggia.
But I don't know a lot about his career. All I know is he made a movie called Fear No Evil, which was really good.
His first movie.
That was his first movie. And then that's the only movie he's ever made that I've seen, I believe. Other than this one, of course.
Yes. Well, I don't know if he's made too many different ones because his first one was Fear No Evil, made in 1981. This is by a boy Antichrist. All right.
Yes.
And then this one happened. And this one's kind of interesting because I never really heard this before. So apparently, A Lady in the White was independently funded by him through a penny stock company that he formed with his cousin, Charles La Luggia.
So they made a penny stock for his movie?
Yeah.
Essentially?
There was basically a penny stock company he formed with his cousin.
Okay.
And through that company, they were able to fund this movie. All right.
Yeah, I'd heard that he funded he came up with $180,000.
Yes.
And it cost like $3 million to make. So he got some money from somewhere else, from the film company. But yeah, he did fund some of it, yes.
Yeah, the story basically is the film was entirely financed through a penny stock offerings, New Sky Communications. All right, a public company set up by Luger and his cousin Charles Luger. Hope I'm not fucking up his name, but there you go.
I have no idea how to say that guy's name.
It traded initially on NASDAQ for 10 cents a share. All right. It was the first and only occasion a single feature film was financed in this manner. After producing a 7-minute promotional reel for the project, New Sky Communications was able to secure $4.7 million from 4,000 investors. So,
oh wow, so more money than I thought was. So he came up with all the money for the movie then.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Yeah,
I got you.
All through his penny stock
wow
investments. So this is the first time it's ever happened for somebody actually basically securing enough money to finance a whole feature film that'd be shown in theaters and everything.
So it was like Kickstarter before Kickstarter.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty amazing though. In 1980, that he could sell enough 10-cent stocks. To finance a $3 million movie.
Yeah, $4 million, even more.
Or $4 million movie. Yeah.
Well, the movie. Let's see. The movie actually. Yeah. Well, yes. The budget for the film was $4.7 million. It did not make that out the box office though.
It did not.
We'll get there. So basically, what our boy Lelugio said,
right.
Frank, all right, said Charlie came to me and said, "Look, we may be able to do this again, raise more money independently if we go public." All right. He said that there was possibly we could structure a penny stock offering to raise the money to make another film. It took us quite a while to structure this public entity called New Sky Communications. We had a number of brokers around the country selling stock for Lady, and it took us about 3 years from the beginning to the end to bring Lady to White to fruition. So it took about 3 years to get the funding, get the filming, and getting everything down. So interesting. So a couple things about the film as well too. Prior to filming, Frank and Charles Lugio storyboard every scene prior to the shots. All right, foregoing a standard practice like a competition bond insurance against budget overages. All right. So
meaning they didn't have a bond.
Yeah.
So like whatever money they had was whatever money they had to spend. They had to finish it under budget essentially.
Yes, but so basically what he's saying basically is you have a budget for a movie, but if you had to go over that, you got to lend more money. They couldn't do that. They had 4.7, so they could not go over budget at all.
Right, because that's what you have a bond for, right? Like if you run over budget, then you can get money from the bond company. Right, I got you. Okay.
Yeah. So principal photography of Lady White began on September 29th, 1986 in Lyons, New York.
Which I believe is right outside Rochester.
Yes.
Logia is from Rochester.
Yeah.
So it was kind of shot in his hometown. Although I'm pretty sure that the majority of this movie was shot inside.
Yeah.
Which I'll talk about and I'll point out some things, but I'm pretty sure almost everything in this movie was shot inside.
Yeah, because a lot of the principal photography they said that took place in Raleigh Studios in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so you know how we talked about the box office being a dud?
Yes.
So here in America, the film only made 1.7 million. Okay.
Ouch.
But I thought this was crazy and a great idea. Frank, with his, Frank and Charles, I guess, before the movie even aired, they already recouped all their money. It's crazy.
Really?
So basically, the Lagugias? I always fucked up this name. Managed to recruit.
I say Lalogia, but I don't think that's right either.
The Lalogias, brother. You can say how southern we are.
If there's any Lalogias out there, please tell us how to say this name because I do not know. And, it's hard to find how to pronounce names.
Yeah, Lalogias managed to recoup the film's budget before the film even hit theaters. They sold the foreign rights to Samuel Goodwin's production for a $1 million advance at 70% of all foreign sales, bringing their foreign earnings to over $2.7 million. All right. So New Century Vista acquired the films for U.S. theatrical distribution, guaranteeing $1 million in prints and ads to promote and open the picture. All right. So if you add
basically,
yes.
They sold the rights away before the movie even came out. So they probably weren't going to make much money off the box office.
Yeah.
But they made their money back beforehand. So
yes. So they actually made it in advance, and they made it off foreign sales. So if you add their foreign sales, if you add their 2 advances that they had an advance from foreign company, $1 million. They had an advance from the American promotional company for $1 million. Plus, you added in the box office sales. That's how they recouped all their money.
Nice.
So, gotta get those advances, man. Gotta get that shit. All right.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get your money back before. I would definitely do that. If I could make my money back, if I could spend $4 million on a movie, and then make my $4 million back before it's released, I would certainly do that. I would give you all the rights to my movie. Sure.
So it said Lady in the Right premiered in the United States on April 22nd, 1988, in 90 theaters in Los Angeles and Chicago. The film was dropped by a number of Southern California theaters after its first week of screening due to average attendance, and a glut of the films were on the market competing for screens before it opened. So basically, it got beat out by a bunch of other films.
Yeah, there was too much coming out at that time, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So in New York City on May 13th, 1988, and expanded to a wide theatrical release on May 20th, 1980. By the end of its theatrical run, it had grossed a total of $1.7 million in the United States. So basically, if you just counted that towards their budget of the film, it was a huge bomb. All right. Let's see what we got here. So apparently, we have Lucas Haas and Katherine Hellman were both nominated for Saturn Awards in 1990. Okay. Haas was also nominated for and won a Young Artist Award. Okay. So of course, them two. Haas is of course the Frank, the young Frank in this movie.
Yeah, and he's a fairly famous actor now.
Yeah. Lucas Haas, I guess.
So he was probably the person that made it the biggest out of this movie that wasn't already famous. Like Alex Rocco was already famous, but yeah. So he became kind of a pretty big big time actor.
Yeah, he was in Mars Attacks, man.
He was in Mars Attacks, yes. He was. He was also in Inception and The Revenant and a few other movies, but yes.
Yeah.
He was in Mars Attacks.
Mars Attacks, man, come on. That was a great. I saw that in theaters, brother. That was a great movie.
That's a good. I said it. That's a great film.
All right. Of course, Catherine, she's the one who played Amanda Harper. They called her Mad Amanda. All right. Let me see a couple other things about the film.
I mostly know her from that TV show Who's the Boss.
Yeah, Who's the Boss?
Where she played Mona.
The Mona. All right, let's see what we got here. So we got. Let me pull up my notes here.
So yeah, while you're looking that up, so Lollodia never made it. He directed one more movie after this in his entire career. Correct?
Yeah. Yes. That's it, man.
So that's really crazy to think that people that do that. I mean, of course, he made $4 million, so he's probably like, okay, well, I'll just live off this money. But yeah, he made one more movie in the 90s, and I don't think he made anything else after this, which is really crazy to me because he made two, well, in my opinion, two really good movies, and then just kind of disappeared.
So, there is a story about an actual lady in the white being like an actual like tale from where Frank lived at. All right, that was another one.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about that, but apparently it's based on an urban legend of a ghostly lady in white near where he lives.
So, a couple other things, some trivia over here for everybody. Director Frank asked his friend Richard J. Silverthorne, who portrayed the adult Lucifer in Fear No Evil, to create a mask that Frankie would use that was representative of Bela Lugosi's Dracula.
Oh,
Okay.
so that's interesting. So
Yeah.
I thought that mask was really cool. So it was created for the movie then. So because I was like, I wonder if I could find that mask somewhere because that looked really cool.
Yeah, the mask is definitely cool.
Yeah, you could tell Frankie was like really into the Universal horror movies because he had Frankenstein stuff, and he had a Bela Lugosi action figure or statue or whatever, and he had the Bela Lugosi mask. I thought that shit looked really good, and it was made just for the movie apparently. So
yeah, and apparently, if you compare the mask with the statue of Count Dracula, that's how like you were supposed to see it, but. Unfortunately, a lot of connections lost on most viewers who, I guess, when seeing this, they thought the mask was of Richard Nixon.
Wow. Okay.
So I could tell all the way it was a vampire mask. I just thought it was like one of those older 1980s, vampire mask.
Yeah, like those 1980s Ben Cooper costumes. Yeah, those are cool.
All right, so let's see.
But apparently, from what I can understand, like he didn't, Frank Luger didn't really like working in Hollywood when he was making his first movie, Fear No Evil.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a huge amount of studio interference that he had to fight through, which is why he didn't make another movie for like 7 years. And then he funded this movie himself so that he could make it the way he wanted to.
Yes. So here we go. So Rochester, New York. That's where Frank, like you said before, that's where he was born.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the film of a popular and long-standing local urban legend known as the Lady in the White. Legend has it that the White Lady had a daughter who disappeared at the hands of a predator. And so the White Lady roams the lake for this day searching for her missing daughter, which is basically was in the film. The supposed residence of the White Light is actually the base of a demolished hotel that was built in the 1800s. Known as the White Lady's Castle, it has become a popular tourist attraction and pay site for the teenagers. Brother, wild teenagers over there. So so basically the Lady in the White tale, he basically put that in the film and it was pretty accurate, I would say.
Yeah.
So one more thing before we get on to the movie. Apparently in the DVD commentary, director Frank says that he got the idea for using the song "Did You Ever See a Dream Walking?" which is a significant plot element in the movie, from hearing it in the Eddie Cantor movie Roman Scandals. All right. But
That's
actually, yes, but actually this song does not appear in Cantor's film. It was written for the musical Sitting Pretty. Both Roman Scandals and Sitting Pretty were released in 1933.
So that's even more interesting. So he got the idea from this movie that the song wasn't in.
Maybe he just got mixed up, you know what I mean?
He probably just got mixed up.
Maybe
it was
did
1933 and
yeah. He did a little blumper.
that was 50 years later. It was 50 years later.
Yeah. Hey man, every once in a while here on the Retro Blood we might do a little blunder. You know what I mean?
No,
it happens.
you don't say. You don't say.
It's rare, but it happens.
It does happen. I don't know how rare it is either, but yeah, it does happen. But yeah, I really like that element of the movie. I thought that song was really good. It's a Bing Crosby song. Did you ever see A Dream Walking? And it's really fucking creepy.
Yeah.
In this movie, I'm wondering if what this movie reminded me a lot of is a Stephen King story.
Yeah, that's
not
pretty
a particular
close.
one, but the way Stephen King tells a story.
Yeah.
You know how like through this whole thing he has this narrator, which is Frankie. Kind of talking about like this is the house where this lady lived in, and I heard her play piano, and blah 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 blah. And you think it has nothing to do with the story, but it comes back around later, and it does.
Yeah.
So this seems like it was hugely influenced by Stephen King.
Yeah, definitely. I can see
complicated, but I feel like that's a huge influence here. But yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Like you're saying, the way like Stephen King kind of narrates his stories throughout. Yeah. And that we would also see that in a lot of films later on too, especially like, child horror films.
What right. All right. And that's a good point too. And like also Stephen King in the 80s had a really good talent at finding, making child protagonists, child heroes for his movies. And, because like you could tell that he's like reaching back to his childhood. And so is Frank is reaching back to his childhood in this. And then imagining what he would be like in this kind of scenario. And I feel like Stephen King did that with It and The Body and a bunch of other things that he'd written. And I really like that idea. I love the idea of the child hero, even as an adult, because as an adult, when you see adults as heroes, you expect them to have everything figured out. But it's interesting to me to see children try to figure out these complicated adult situations.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To see Frankie try to figure out and try to solve this murder. Although it's kind of weird that this like 10-year-old kid can solve this murder that the police can't solve in 10 years. But anyway, we'll get there.
Well, also too, on your point about the child stars in these kind of films, I think that kind of actually got pretty popularized in the 80s and the 90s. And even nowadays it's pretty popular because, obviously Stranger Things, which is one of the biggest shows on Netflix and out there.
But that's a huge throwback, though.
Yeah, it's a little throwback.
To the 80s.
Yeah, but it had the same kind of concept. All these kids figuring out the mysteries of what is going on in your small, evil town.
It's like the Goonies generation, right?
Exactly. So yeah, it's all about it. By the way, we've done a couple of Stephen Kings on this podcast before. Everybody go check out our review of Silver Bullet, which is a fun
Silver Bullet, which also has a kid in it.
Which also has a kid. There you go. So, but everybody, I say let's get into it. Let's start off this April right by talking about some ghosts, talk about some wild stuff. Let's get into the Lady in the White.
Lady in the White.
It's 1962. It's Halloween.
I wish I was as weird as you. Thanks.
There's nothing wrong with the town of Willow Point Falls that a powerful imagination can't cure.
The London Bridge crumpled under the monster's huge lizard feet. That's impossible. Or is it?
But this time, it's not make-believe.
No, don't hurt her. It was too dark. I couldn't see his face.
This time it's serious, deadly serious.
I'm telling you, that doesn't matter. This case has been making monkeys out of all of us for the past 10 years.
And strange. Very strange. For you have seen a girl.
There was a little girl. I saw her. She was killed in the cloakroom.
A girl who wants you to find her killer.
Will you help me?
You have just one hope to solve the mystery.
Sometimes when someone dies violent, they can't rest in peace.
To stop the evil.
Where are you going? I gotta follow her.
To save your life.
I'm here, child.
Open the door. Say your prayers. Lady in White.
All right. So we start off the film with a guy where we're later going to be knowing him as, I guess, Frank Older.
Yeah.
All right. He arrives at the airport. He gets picked up by a local taxi driver. And like, hey, man, you're that famous writer. What's it like living in Los Angeles? He's like, it's all right. It's different. It's not like, this small town or nothing. Living in a small town. All these small towns, brother. All right, so now they're talking about the book that he's written called Into the Fog. Is that a ripoff of The Fog?
Probably.
All right.
It sounds just like a generic horror book title that they just came up with off the top of their head.
So now Frank, older Frank, after getting back from his Los Angeles trip to visit his small town, all right, stops at a graveyard and looks at some graves. And now they can, now he's having some flashbacks. Okay. I wasn't exactly sure, but I'm guessing he became a famous author because he wrote this story. Like his life story. So I'm guessing.
Well, no. Yeah. I mean, he was a writer. He was a writer as a kid. And it becomes a plot point later, a little bit later on, kind of. But he was a writer as a kid because he wrote the story about that giant monster that terrorized London.
Yeah,
in
London
the movie.
Monster. Yeah.
But yeah, so the taxi driver, he has a taxi driver stop at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And he goes to see two graves, and he said, "Did you know them?" And then it shows a close up of his eyes, and then our movie starts. Then we can flash back to 1962, which I'm assuming he's telling this movie is him telling the cab driver this entire story. And they just stand there for 2 hours while he tells them the story.
They're standing in a cemetery for 2 hours while this guy gives the story, brother. I'm like,
cab driver's like, I wish I'd never asked. I wish I'd just stayed in the goddamn car.
Well, I'm thinking like, imagine that bill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no kidding. But he's a famous writer. He's got the money. I would
just stay in the car. All right. So now it's Halloween for this small town. It all looks like some Disney. Not right now. It's reminding me of Disney. I mean, like small town Disney movies, Goonies movies, E.T. All that small town kid stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we see the main younger Frank. All right, with that cool vampire mask on.
Yeah.
He's gonna go in school in it. And then the big funny joke of this was the grandpa keeps hiding smoking from the grandma.
So I thought this was a really cool element of the movie, and you could tell that this is definitely part of Frank's childhood. Like people who are like first generation Americans.
Yeah.
Usually their parents. Well, I guess Frank was a second generation American, but his grandparents came over here from Italy. You can just tell. They don't tell him the story in the movie, but you can just tell by the way they're talking about it. How his grandparents came over here from Italy.
Yeah.
Half the time they speak Italian and half the time they speak kind of dodgy English.
Yes.
Which we'll get to with his grandmother later on, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so she's angry that her husband Charlie is smoking.
Yes.
And he's always trying to hide smoking from her.
And he dropped it on his pant leg.
Yeah. And then he sets himself on fire.
So then we meet Geno, who is the older brother of Frank.
Yeah.
All right. And Geno is kind of like a prankster. All right. So then they all chase each other by bike riding. And this is like, okay, I'm definitely watching some kid Goosebumps, you know what I mean? With his chase scene and everything.
So at this point in the movie, you hated me for picking this, I can tell.
I didn't hate it. I just wasn't expecting it from such a hardcore watcher of yours. Now, okay, at this time, I was like, okay, we're doing Alison's picks.
Yeah.
So maybe this is like one of the picks that you do for like a childhood fun movie. You know what I mean? Like one of your childhood favorites. Which makes sense.
That's definitely true. But yeah, coming out of how much I enjoyed the corpse fucking in the last week's movie. Yeah, this is not exactly what you would pick.
Exactly.
I think I would pick, probably.
I was like, okay, we're going this way. Hey, if I have some childhood movies that I liked. Mine just happened to be the Leprechaun series.
Right, which we're going to get to eventually.
Yes. Well, we did one of them. We did one Leprechaun. We did the first Leprechaun on Lights Out, and then Alison said, never again. But I'm saying, man, there's more. Okay, there's more out there.
There are more. I'm sure we'll end up doing them.
So they're going bike riding through the streets like Disney. That's why I put in my notes. Yeah. Finally, it ends with Frank falling into cement, which that could have been really bad. Okay?
Yeah.
Then the Geno apologizes, and now he's going to go get some toilet paper because he has a reputation to hold for tonight of TPing people's houses on Halloween.
Absolutely.
All right. So now Frank goes to school. It's very 80s, which I appreciate it. On the 80s Halloween, everybody just acting up crazy. Got pumpkins like you do over there, all hanging around everywhere. Mm-hmm. All right. This is when Frank reads his story about a London monster taking over London. All right. And we can see that one girl likes it. His crush. All right. Now we have Donald and Louie. And they're planning on tricking Frank to lock him in the cloak closet. All right?
Yeah, the cloak room.
Yeah, the cloak room. Does your school have a bunch of cloak rooms?
Actually, my elementary school did. So you have a cloakroom typically when, for two reasons. One, you if your school has a theater, because back then, I don't know if they still do this, but back then schools would usually put on a yearly play of some kind in their theater, and the theater would have a cloakroom, which is where they store their costumes.
Yeah.
So this is like a cloakroom where you store like coats and things, I believe.
There you go.
Is where he's actually at. But yeah, he gets. Well, we'll get there, but he gets locked in the cloakroom.
Apparently, this cloakroom is deadly.
It is.
Right.
Well, there was a bunch of kids killed there, but yeah.
So they basically trick him to go back into the school because they said he forgot something, even though they stole it. He goes back into the school. He turns off a pumpkin light, which I liked, and then they lock him in the cloakroom. All right. He starts freaking out a little bit. He's sitting there. Remember, we have 2 hours, so he could sit there for a long time. All right. And then it finally gets nighttime, and now he starts to daydream. And this is our first dark part of the story. Apparently, his mother died. They don't say what she died. Did she say what she died of? They didn't really say what she died of. I don't think so,
but yeah, she died when he was young. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we have a scene of her. Basically, his trauma coming out where he sees her in the coffin. Then we see a scene of her saying she'll never leave him. And then, of course, she does because she dies. And it's, sad. So I was like, okay, we're getting to the hard parts of the story.
Right. Okay. So you were mentioning, he does sit there for a little while where nothing happens. Yeah. But they're just I think they're trying to present the idea that he's there all night. That he can't get out. Yeah, which is which shows a different time because there were no cell phones. So now he would just call his dad on his cell phone to have him come get him out. But back then, I guess you had to sit there all night if you got locked in school.
He didn't have no pager either, brother.
Didn't have no pager either.
All right. Yeah, you had to sit there all night until they could kind of figure out where he might be. All right, so there's two things that's significant on this. The first one we didn't mention yet is there a janitor whose name is Willie.
Yeah.
And he is of African American descent. So
he is African American.
This is 1960, so they're not treated as fairly.
No.
1960 as they are, later on. So we're seeing that incorporated into our story. All right. Also, too, while Frank is locked up in the cloak closet, he does hear some bells because it's some sort of like church school or something like that. And that's also a significant part because when he wakes up from his dream, he now sees the ghost Star Wars girl, Melissa.
That's not fair.
She's a force. She's a force ghost, right?
She does look like a force ghost. Yes. I mean, I'm sure that's the blue screen techniques they use. That's probably the best.
Oh, there's a bunch of them
on the money that they had. This is one of those movies.
That's what my penny stocks are paying for. All right.
This is not. This is one of those movies that does not look as good in high definition as it does in standard definition. That's for sure.
So I put in my notes, the lady shows up like a, you know what this also kind of reminded me of? Like, it also kind of reminded me of The Wizard of Oz. Like, the characters were kind of acting like that a little bit. You know what I mean? The dialogue of the characters. So she's basically moving around like a ghost kid character, and then she gets killed. So I was like, okay. And then she vanishes, and then now we have the killer comes in to the cloakroom. And the killer is going for the air vent. And he's about to open it. He sees a rat, but then he sees Frankie with his vampire mask on, grabs him and starts choking him. And then this is when we have totally a kid's thing. Now Frankie is forced gliding. While he's being choked to death, he's forced gliding through the town.
Okay. Yes.
Fly. You know what I mean? Like the 80s flying.
No, I know what you're talking about. I think it looks cool. Yeah.
It does look cool.
It's awesome.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And then he eventually.
The best special effect these days, but it looked good.
It's like you're on a base and you're moving, and then I could do it. Like if I'm going like this, and then I can take my cut out and go through the town.
You know what I mean? But back then it was harder to do. Yeah. You couldn't do it on your laptop back then.
Exactly.
But
a little tougher.
It was harder to do.
So he's force gliding throughout the town, and he eventually ends up at the cemetery, And then this is when he meets Melissa, and that's when he finds out her name is Melissa and everything. And her big thing is, she asks him where he wants to go. He says, I want to go back home. And she just wants to meet her mom again. Okay, so that's the big story of Melissa. All right. And then now, Frank is going towards the light of the sun. He sees his dad all upset. He sees Geno going through his toys and finds the love letter. He sees Donald and Louie laugh turn to tears because they're by the grave. All right. And this is when he eventually wakes up because the dad is giving him CPR. And there's cops all around there. All right. And then, of course, during this time, the cops grab Willie because Willie is the janitor and he was passed out on the job drunk. All right. So now everybody thinks the cops and stuff, their number one suspect is Willie because, a couple reasons. Number one, he was drunk there. He was drunk. He was on the scene. And he's black. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when the dad, Al. By the way, the dad's name is Al. Okay.
Yep. Al Scarlatti.
Yes. And he's jumped into the ambulance. And right behind the cop, it said, have a safe Halloween. Which I appreciated. So now we're at an old barn. That's where, of course, Frank... Do all these little kids in 1980s horror movies, did they all live at a barn?
Well, a lot of those kids have barns back then. Yeah, it's probably not uncommon.
Like, did you have a barn?
I have a barn now.
Oh, there you go. Maybe
you're in the 1950s.
Maybe you're from the 1980s horror movies.
Maybe. I mean, a lot of stuff around here hasn't changed that much since then. I live out in the country. My barn was built in the 50s. It survived the hurricane too. So yeah.
There you go. That's awesome. All right. So now, congratulations, you have surpassed. All right. We should write a horror movie out there. Alison's Creep Barn. All right.
Good.
So now the dad is like drawing a picture of the Willows Falls Cemetery. And I'm not going to lie to you, Alison. You can explain this to me too. Did you first think that the dad was a serial killer?
At first I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I was afraid that the dad was going to be the killer at first, yes.
Yeah. I had that little feeling. I was like, no way. Like, how dark are we going to get this shit? You know what I mean?
It almost gets that dark, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew for sure that Willie wasn't the killer, though. I mean, like, he couldn't have been, right?
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah, that was definitely a red herring.
Yeah,
that was definitely. Yeah, you could tell right away that's kind of like the red herring throughout the whole movie. But that part does get pretty dark, too.
It does.
So now Frank wakes up. Al goes meets him and stuff. We have the grandma talking to the kid. I put more Disney moments. It's happening right here. You can take a shot to every time I say Disney moment, if y'all want to. All right. So they talk about Donald and Lou trapping him in there. He said Lou is the one who confessed that they trapped him in the cloak closet. All right. And then like Frank would say, hey, there's something else that happened there. But this is when Geno shows up with the newspaper saying Frank's a local hero because he survived the killer that's been haunting their town for 10 years. All right. And this is when the grandparents are arguing again. And Geno now talks to, Geno says like, hey, I had a kid in my class get killed by this killer. So you got lucky you didn't die. You would have been more of a legend. And the dad tells him to apologize by saying that shit. All right.
Right.
All right. So now Al gets a call, and now we're at the courthouse. All right. And really, basically, just randomly just gets charged with all 11 counts of murder and 1 assault. Okay. So we don't see a trial. We just see the end of it, basically saying that he got charged with everything.
Well, yeah. So he went to the grand jury. So the grand jury decides if they have enough evidence to take him to court to arrest him.
But it's weird because apparently they had maybe enough evidence at the time to arrest him, but they didn't later on have enough evidence to indict him because he just got off with no evidence.
Right, but basically you can a DA can go to a grand jury and get a conviction, get approval for basically anything. So all they have to do is that they don't have to prove anything. They just have to prove that they have reason to think that he might have done it.
Yeah.
And in being black in 1962 is probably enough for these people to indict him.
Yeah. So
as we will see.
Yeah, and then there's some stuff that comes up later too about that. So Frank is now, he gets that paper that Geno brought in, and now he figures out that Melissa was the first victim of this serial killer's murders. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they also talk about Widow's Peak, which is the grounds that the lady in the white haunts. That's the legend around there.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So then we have two guys come in. One guy's named Phil and one guy's named Tony. They're basically friends to the owl. Phil is more of a friend than Tony is, but they're basically like, you would say, I guess they're like the uncles of Frank, even though they're not. I don't think they're all like blood related.
No, I don't think they're not blood related, but they're
Yeah.
like close. I think I took it as that they're very close family friends, and Frank grew up with Phil.
Yes.
And Frank grew up knowing Phil, and then Frank's dad went to high school with Phil, as we will see later on.
Yeah, they talk about that. So they call him like Broken Arrow because he sucks at doing arrows. All right, so they gave him a brand new bow and arrow, and they said they want him to go practice with it. Geno comes in and he wants Frank to sign the newspapers because he said if he gets his signature on them, he can sell them for 50 cents on the dollar, brother.
Wow.
All right. So our boy Geno trying to get that trick money. All right. So now we have Phil is basically they're all talking to each other. Phil, Tony, and Frank saying, "Man, I couldn't believe it was Willie." Okay. Don says something I can't repeat on the radio right now, and Don is pretty much convinced that it was Willie this whole time. But Al is not, because he's like, why the hell would he do that? Like, he has the kids and families and stuff. And, like, when they found him, he was drunk ass. Like, why would he choke out and try to kill Frank and then stay in the basement when he was drunk? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And
right.
Then Phil's kind of being like, you know, we got to see what happens with the evidence and everything. And then this is when we could tell that Phil and Frank are close. This is when they bring up Phil's parents dying and him basically being taken in by Al's parents. And they basically grew up together. They're very close. All right. And then this is also too when Al said he used to thought fear was something you get over until his wife died. And now he's a fear of every day of losing his child. All right. So there you go. Very some hard-hitting stuff. All right. So now this is another thing we could see that they're kind of like doing for the time period. Al watching a TV of basically the, what's his name, James, going to a college, and all the whites being all pissed off about it.
Right, because this was around the time of integration, so black people started going to white colleges for the first time. Yeah. Or colleges in general.
So not only were we showing that time period, but we're also showing basically what's happening to Willie, where he's basically being charged with an unjust crime that he didn't commit just because he's black. Okay. So now we're back in Frank's room. We could see a cool looking Frankenstein, Dracula, and Wolfman toy, which I appreciated. I wanted all three of them.
Yep.
Melissa's back. She's a ghost girl playing with his things. All right. And then she draws a heart. The chair moves right now, and some music. That music that we talked about earlier is playing in the background. And then we have supposedly the old lady in white shows up, but we find out that's actually somebody different later. So now we're having this ghost lady go through the Star Wars ghost forest. Alison, do you have in your barn in your backwoods, do you have a Star Wars ghost forest?
I do have a forest, but it's not nearly as coolly lighted as that is, with all the
fog.
Blue and yellow lights and the fog. And I do have fog, yeah. I have lots of fog.
Is there like
similar?
Is it like you got to go around the trees and there's always seem to be a right amount of fog on your feet?
Well, there's quite a bit of fog, yes. Oh, fog doesn't really, you can't really see it that close to you. But yeah, there's a lot of fog. I thought this scene looked really cool, and this is one of those scenes I was talking about where it's definitely shot inside. Like they definitely built this forest inside and lit it perfectly for this beautiful ghostly scene. It was fantastic. It looked beautiful though.
So now the next morning, all right, they're all like praying. We're at the prayer place. All right. And we're at the church. All right. And the father's, doing prayers, thanking God that Frankie's still alive. But they're all doing prayers for all the kids that killed. And then we have Richie's mom comes up and saying, why was my son not spared? You know what I mean? Why didn't God forgive my son or spare my child? Mm-hmm. And then like at the time, Willie's family's there too with the kids. And Willie's wife kind of gets up and she's like trying to leave with the kids. And then Richie's mom looks at her saying, I spit on your husband. And then she falls down to the ground. So I thought that scene was pretty rough. I was like, damn.
Yeah. Because obviously he must have killed him because he was black, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like one of those things where, if you're a grieving parent and you don't really have any explanation of, who killed your child, and now the police arrested this guy, you're just going to automatically think that he's the killer without even going through a trial. Like,
True.
It's kind of like one of those things that's all in your head. You're just like, okay, I made up my mind. That's the killer. Right?
Yeah. There's a scene like this in Jaws where the mom comes up to Roy Scheider and slaps him because she thinks he didn't close the beaches when he's the only one that actually wanted to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's one of those things, you know what I mean, where it's kind of like it's a without knowing all the facts and everything, you kind of just prejudge because you're in so much grief. All right.
Exactly.
So now Frank goes to that vent hole. He finds a bunch of toys or little objects, and he finds a ring. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you can tell that he basically found where the killer kept all the souvenirs from the victims. Okay. So then he says a time warp, because it's 2 hours. Remember, we have a lot of time here. With this, we have all this time here because of the penny funds. You know what I mean? So
I get it. I get it. It's a little longer than our normal movies. I got it.
So now time has passed, and now it's Christmas time. All right? And the penny funds, we have to have a scene that we can't cut out, but we have to have this scene of the teacher doing limbo. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That couldn't have been cut out from the movie, period, right? We had that was definitely plot-centric.
Thank you, penny funds. We needed this. All right. Now we're having Christmas cookies.
Yeah.
Now they're hanging up Christmas lights and stuff. Okay, cool.
Well, how else would we know it's Christmas if we didn't have these things?
Now
we know it's we know it's been 2 months now. That's how we know that time has passed. It's been 2 months.
It's not going to show Halloween again. We got to go at Christmas time. All right. So now we also see that we do see that Phil and Tony and stuff helped do up the Christmas lights. Okay.
Yeah.
So now Frank, since it's been some time has passed, he is now growing up fast, and what used to scare him doesn't scare him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's been a couple months, brother.
In a couple months.
So now he's sleeping. Radio comes on. Guess what? Ghost Melissa's back. And she's by the Christmas tree. She says she wants to help finding her mom. And of course, she has a little angel in white to represent the lady in white.
Mm-hmm.
And then they zoom out, and the house is all Christmased out, which I appreciated. Now Frank says everybody needs a place alone.
Yep.
And he has a thinking tree.
I love this.
Do you have a thinking tree there, Alison?
No, but I thought about getting one after seeing this again because I forgot about the thinking tree. So I think it's amazing that he goes and sits inside in a tree. He climbs a tree and sits on the limb so he can think. Man,
is the
simpler times in the 60s.
Is the new thinking tree for adults the toilet?
Probably, yes.
Okay. That's that's where I do all my thinking, brother.
It was simpler times in 1962, that's for sure.
All right. Mail guy arrives.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "What are you doing up there, Frankie?" He's like, "Well, I'm thinking this is my thinking tree." We got 2 hours here, everybody, okay? And he's all like, "Guess what? I dropped off that package from Nebraska. They all get happy like it's a Disney movie. All right. Frankie goes in there like this is a Christmas Story now. And he unwraps a typewriter.
Yes. Which he ordered from Nebraska for some reason.
Yeah, Nebraska. All right. And of course, while he does this, the killer ring falls out of his sack of toys that he doesn't want to show the cops.
Right.
So now we have Al and the cop talking. Okay. And the cop's like, hey, we need Frank to identify Willie because of this case here. Like, he's like the only guy we have for evidence. And Al's like, listen, man, like, I don't really think Willie did it because, you know, he was drunk and he has kids and stuff. And the cop says, listen, man, we've been trying to do this case for 10 years and we finally have somebody to pinpoint it on because he's black.
Yeah. And his fingerprints were all over the school.
Yeah. And they talk about that. Oh, his fingerprints are all over the school. And Al's like, well, he works there. Of course they're going to be all over the fucking school. All right. All right. So basically the cop says this. He says, listen, man, this guy is the perfect scapegoat because he's black.
Yeah. He literally says that. So he's like, we can convict this guy because he's black. Yeah. And then we can close all these child murder cases for the last 10 years that we can't solve.
Yeah, exactly. So now Frank hears all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then Phil finds him and he just blurts out everything to Phil. He doesn't blurt it out to his dad or the cops. He just blurts it out to Phil.
So like, I was a little confused about this scene too.
Yeah.
So Frank is looking through a hole in the wall, listening to them talk, correct?
Yeah.
But then Phil comes up behind him, so he turns around. So you would think that he's trying to be like quiet, so they don't know he's actually listening.
Yeah.
But then Phil comes up behind him and he turns around and screams Phil's name like really loud, and then tells Phil everything that he just heard.
Everything. And he's all like,
and the hole's like right behind his head.
Yeah.
Like, how would they not know he's listening?
And he says it in a very fast kid tone. I found this vent, and the vent had a bunch of toys in it, and this ring in there, and then I think that's what he did, and blah, blah, blah. And Phil's like, what the fuck are you talking about, kid? All right. And then Al comes in. Frank was going to tell Al the whole stuff, but he says, go help your mom out with the table. Or your grandma out with the table. Mm. And during all this stuff, Geno finds the ring. Uh-oh. Al now is looking at... This is when I thought Al might be the killer too, because he has a trunk of old things he doesn't want the kids to go through.
Mm-hmm.
All right. They're all eating. Al's like, I know one of y'all been through my trunk. Don't do it again. They asked where Grandpa was, and I thought for sure we see a scene where the grandpa's like in the toilet, and I thought he was smoking a bong in the toilet. But he was just digging for cigarettes, and then he falls into the water, and everybody laughs.
No, that's not what happened. That's the scene where he asks where he is.
Yeah, he's in the water looking for cigarettes.
She says he's drowning himself in the bathtub.
I thought he was smoking a bong.
No, and then we have a humorous moment where he's trying to drown himself in the bathtub, and then the grandmom screams upstairs, "Did you take off your brand new watch before you tried to drown yourself?" Then he lifts up his hand and he realizes he didn't, so now his new watch is ruined too. And then he falls in the bathtub, and then that's where his cigarettes are, because she hit him in the drain.
Ah,
it was just a humorous, funny moment.
Comedy, brother.
It was trying to lighten up all the child murder.
That's true. Yeah, you got to do that. You know, it's like they did in the '70s movies. You know what I mean? They would have a crazy scene, and then they would go to dumb cops with funny music, lighten up the scene. All right, so now Frank, in his narrated voice, we have to learn more plot points because this is a 2-hour movie. Now we're meeting Mad Miss Amanda. All right, so the story behind Mad Miss Amanda is she used to teach kids piano lessons, but then she went crazy one day, burnt her house down, and she was still in there, and they put her in a insane asylum or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So Frank says, he goes by that house every once in a while, but he doesn't really see her. Now Frank talks to Lou and Don, and they ask him, let's go find the lady in the White's house. He says no, but because Frank gets peer pressured by 1980s kids, he goes with them. All right. And we see that mad Amanda looks on. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to the lady in the white's old barn house. They go in there. Donald has found a lizard or iguana. He says, "This is the beast who destroyed London," making fun of Frank's script. Throws the lizard on them. Lizard goes flying. Now they're going to go chase. This is all kid stuff. My God. This is like some 1990s, 80s kids adventure stuff right here, trying to find a lizard.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, they're just chasing around her old house that she lived in.
And this lizard hides in the little house and he gets away.
Yeah.
I put just like a Disney movie. So Frank's in that room, and now we can see that the lady in the white and Melissa are related because the lady in the white is Melissa's mom. So we got that proof now because of all the pictures on her dresser.
Yes.
And this is when Frank puts the little hairpin that he found in the vent, he puts it on there. So now Lou and Don are trying to capture the lizard, but the supposed lady in the white shows up very slowly doing this thing.
Like the ghost thing, yeah.
The ghost thing with their hair going all around there. They freak out, they run. Frank comes there, he sees her, he freaks out, he runs away. All right? There you go. So now Frank's running through the Star Wars forest.
Mm-hmm.
The same one that Luke Skywalker trained at with Yoda.
Yeah, exactly. It looks exactly the same as that, to be honest with you.
Maybe they just reused that.
Maybe they just reused the same set.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Strikes Back.
All right. So Geno tackles him. All right. Said Dad came out to find you. All right. This is when he said, "I found her. I found the lady in the white." All right. It's Melissa's mom. Geno doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And then he's like, "I figured it all out. All the toys there, like the guy with the ring is the one who killed all these kids." Okay. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "I don't have the ring on me. I lost it." Of course, Geno's the one who took it. And Geno's like, "Okay, let's just go home." And then he says, "Hey, it might snow later, by the way." So now Geno, after hearing this story from Frank, goes to the dad's trunk and he starts comparing the rings. Because it's the same class ring, okay, that Al had. It's from the same year.
Right.
Okay?
So he figures out whoever owned this ring went to school with his dad.
Yes. And now there's engravings on it. So now we have the typewriter going. It's Melissa typing stuff, I guess.
Which is why we have the typewriter is in the movie at all, right? So that Melissa can type on it.
Was also
that's
show.
not why he ordered it.
Yeah.
That he ordered it because he wants to be a writer, but it's in the movie so that Melissa can type on it and communicate with him. I did think this scene with Geno was funny because to show us that it was the same year as his dad's class ring.
Yeah.
He used his dad's class ring to look up his own dad in the yearbook as if he didn't know who his dad was.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
It's great, man. That's how you do detective work there, man.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's how you do detective work when you're a little kid, I guess.
So this is also, we got a funny scene of Grandpa coming down trying to smoke. Geno says, "Charles." Then Geno, because remember, Al doesn't want the kids looking through his trunk. All right. Mm-hmm. So Geno goes to go tell Frank what he saw. And then when Geno comes into the room, he sees Ghost Melissa and he starts freaking out. And he's like, "What does she want?" And Frank's like, "Well, she wants his mother." And Geno's like, "Well, do you got her number? We can just call her."
Funny.
And he's like, "No, her mother's the lady in the white." All right. So now we hear Melissa now hears some bells. So she has to get a little sad. And then she starts ghost flying to it. Frank says, the bells, I heard those the same night that I was stuck in the cloak closet. Okay. And this is when he takes her. So because, since Melissa's spirit is stuck in a spirit time loop, every time around this time, her body gets taken and killed. Her forced spirit ghost. Mm-hmm. All right.
Right.
And Geno wants to go with them. So they go to the cloak room. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I thought this scene looked really cool because you can see Melissa walking down the street holding the hand of the killer. Yeah. But you can't see who the killer is because he's not dead. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And also too, like when they see her in the cloakroom, they can see her being carried. So basically, around this time, I don't know if it's every night or certain nights or something, or certain parts of the year. Like she'll go back into the cloakroom, she'll get choked or something, and then the killer, I guess, carries her all the way to the cliffs. So this killer took Melissa to a cloakroom, had her dance around in a dress, and then strangled her, and then walked with her from the school all the way to the cliffs without being noticed by one single person at all.
Well, it was 10 o'clock at night. People went to sleep earlier then.
Even? Okay. I guess. All that farming, brother. It's tiring. Okay. All right, so they take it all the way to the cliffs. Geno couldn't make it because his foot got hurt in glass. So Frank follows Melissa through the Star Wars forest. That's what I put in my notes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. She now wakes up. Melissa's ghost does, screams mom. Then this is when we can see Melissa's mom, lady in the white, come out of the house. And then this is when we see that Melissa's mom saw her dead on the cliffs. And she apparently turned into some sort of angel. And then now she falls into the cliffs as well. And that's how the lady in the white died. And that became a force ghost. Got all that there?
Got it. Yeah, so she saw her dead body, right? And then she threw herself off, and that's why she's a ghost.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So she got ghost powers from seeing all that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So now the grandma wakes up Geno. It's 3:30. Thinks that he's sick. This is when we hear that Phil is going to take Frank out for some bow and arrow practice. Geno wants to go, but he can't. All right, so then we cut the scene. This seems pretty dark. So we have the news reporters. They said that they didn't have enough evidence to indict Willie, so they're going to let him go. Okay, so all the the reporters are trying to get a word with them, and he basically got released by the grand jury. All right, now we have Richie's mom's there. She tells her husband like, "Oh man, I feel so bad. I just want to go up to him and apologize." Okay. So Willie's in the car, all right, and his wife is not in the car. She's like kind of outside of it. And he gets a knock on the door and he sees Richie's mom. So he lowers the window and she apologizes. Says, "Hey, I apologize for blaming you for Richie's death and everything." And of course, Willie's like, "Okay, well, that means a lot from you." And then you could see that her blouse or her white sheet basically comes up a little bit.
Handkerchief.
A handkerchief. Mm-hmm. And then she's like, "This is for Richie." And then she shoots that motherfucker in the head.
Yeah, you didn't see that coming, did you?
That was some dark stuff, bro. I did not see that coming in this kid's movie.
First time I saw that, it was shocking. Like when I first saw this movie, that was shocking that she shot him in the car. Like, wow.
Yeah. So she shot him to the car, and then the wife is right there, and she basically goes into shock, and so she falls down, and you can see that Al and the cop are there. All right. So it makes me think, like, once this Richie girl finds out that Al really didn't kill her, like, she's definitely going to jail. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, very interesting. So now Geno, he's back. Now he looks at both rings. You can see that one said ARS, which was his dad. And then the one that said MPT, which was Philip.
Yeah, but he had to look that up to find that out.
Yeah, you had to look it up in the yearbook, brother. All right? That's how you do investigating. All right? So now they find it's Phil's ring. He's like, "Oh shit, it's Phil." So now we have Phil and Frank shooting arrows. All right. Phil wanted to talk a little bit with Frank, but Frank said he's tired. He wants to go back home. All right. Yeah. So now Philip shows Frank how to shoot an arrow. Very creepy. Mm-hmm. Gets up really close to him and stuff.
Like real close to his face. Yeah.
Yeah. They all pack up. And then Phil starts humming a song. All right, that same song that Melissa kept doing, and now Frank's.
Have you ever seen A Dream Walking?
Yeah. Yes, and then Frank's like freaked out now, so he doesn't give Phil the keys. He basically locks himself in the car. Phil's starting to get crazy and go crazy. All right, he eventually closes the back window on him, but Frank breaks out of it Phil breaks out of it, and then Frank breaks out of the car and runs to the Star Wars forest. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then this is when Phil says, listen, man, I'm unarmed. So he takes off the arrow and everything. He said, listen, I did not know it was you under that vampire mask. If I would have known it was you, I never would have choked you. Okay.
All right. So it's fine for him to choke some other kid, just not Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, because
he choked plenty of kids.
So we didn't really get the explanation of why Phil was killing all these kids. I mean, you can kind of put like 2 to 2 together, I guess, because he had trauma of his parents not being there, and then maybe just killing kids because of that.
Well, no, it's like a Freddy Krueger type thing. He's just a child murderer.
Yeah.
Maybe he just enjoyed doing it. Who knows?
Yeah. So they didn't really explain it. They didn't explain that part, which is fine. But they did explain because he was such a big, friends of Al and stuff, he would never hurt Al's kids, supposedly. Okay. Right. So now Frank runs away, and he runs into the lady in the white's house. Okay. And this is when Frank sees the lady in the white, and he runs away. And this is when Phil captures him. All right. Then we see that Geno, all right, is now going to his Al and the cops. Okay. So Phil is now choking Frank again, saying, hey, man, I will never hurt you and stuff. You just need to give me the ring. Just give me the ring. Everything will go away. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And then while this is happening, the lady in the white, a.k.a. Mad Amanda, knocks him out. So now, because it's 2 hours, now Frank is in the bed with random candles all around them.
Lots and lots and lots of candles.
I mean, we can't use lights. We just got to put candles everywhere.
But she doesn't have electricity. But she's so remember, so she's not really the lady in white. Yeah. She's the lady that
she's Mad Amanda, who is walking around all spooky.
Right. She's the one they think is the lady in white, but isn't really. But we'll figure that out in a minute. But yeah, so she hit Phil in the head with a rock.
Yeah.
And then she took Frankie back up to her bedroom so he could recover from being strangled.
Yes.
With lots and lots and lots of candles.
And now we figure out what is Mad Amanda's deal.
Yeah.
So her deal was she taught the lady in the white and Melissa how to play piano. And then when they both died, she wanted to die, but they didn't let her die because of the house burning. And then she just became an insane ghost lady who's not really a ghost lady.
No, she's a real person. But she said she would teach Frankie to play piano as well.
Yes, she would.
If he wanted.
Then she gives Frankie a good little kiss, saying, hey, don't worry about it. I killed Phil. And of course, guess what? She did it.
She didn't. Of course not.
Phil comes up, starts strangling her, knocks over all the random candles that we had to do there so the house would burn. Because that's how it was booked. Okay.
Exactly. Because how would the house catch on fire if we didn't have 3,000 candles in this room?
Now the house is all burning. Phil grabs Frank. Well, first he beats the fucking shit out of Mad Amanda. All right?
Yeah.
And we don't see that. It's kind of like off camera a little bit. And then Phil grabs Frank and gets him out of the burning house. All right? And then now Phil wants to throw Frank off the cliff because that's his gimmick. That's like his signature, throwing kids off the cliff, apparently.
Apparently, that is his gimmick, but I don't know why he just didn't let him burn in the house if he's going to kill him anyway.
I don't know. Exactly. I don't know.
2 hours.
Yeah, we got 2 hours. 2 hours. We have 2 hours, brother. Okay, we got to do it one at a time. And we had to have this. We have to do this Will Graham Hannibal scene from season 3 of Hannibal, where they're on a cliff for a long time, trying to throw one another off. Okay, or the Good Son. That was on the Good Son too. Okay,
it's been in a few things.
But been in a couple things. So they're going back and forth for, I mean, golly, this is 2 hours, brother. So there's like 10 minutes of them going back and forth and getting off this cliff.
Oh, they're fighting on the cliff. Yeah.
Yes. So eventually.
Yeah.
I could not believe this in my eyes. So while they're like struggling and fighting off this cliff, the real lady in the white shows up.
Yeah.
She apparently has Raiden powers because she could do 80s blue lightning from her hands.
Yep.
And then she doesn't use the Raiden powers on Phil. No, she turns into a flying ghost lady and flies at him.
Cool. That was cool.
Uh-huh.
I love that where she's lifting up her arms and then like her dress comes up like wings. That was fucking cool, dude.
So she goes flying or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Frank's okay. We have this long scene of Melissa randomly coming out of the fire for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's meeted with her Force Ghost mom. They're all hugging. There's like this 80s lights everywhere. There's like 80s dots everywhere. They fly up like they're E.T. and they get on out of there because they've been reunited. And it feels so good.
It does.
Okay.
Reunited.
Then this is a horror film, technically. So Phil is still alive, so he grabs Frank's leg.
Yeah, he's hanging off the edge of the cliff.
The cops come with Al.
And his dad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Al just like okay, so like if y'all can see this on the video. So basically, Phil has the hand right on Frank's leg like this, holding it.
Yeah.
And Al just comes over there and does this. All right? And he just slaps the hand out, and the guy's like, okay, I'll just get my hand off. Like he kind of like shoots it. He like shoots it.
Yeah, you're right. He doesn't hit very hard. He just like shoots it off. Yeah. Let him go.
So now Al looks at Phil. He's all like, take it. Take my hand. Phil takes it for a second, looks at him again, saying, I've seen Die Hard. I know how this ends. And he drops his hand and he falls, 80s style, into the water. All right? And of course...
Horrible cheap blue screen.
Horrible cheap blue screen. And Al's like, Philip!
Because this scene, as with a lot of scenes in this movie, were filmed inside. They built the cliff set inside, the house set inside.
Yeah.
And then they used stock footage or footage they filmed somewhere of a cliff, and then they superimposed it blue screen on the back of it, and you can tell. You can even see the blue lines around the characters and everything that was on the set. Like it looks pretty bad in high definition.
Yeah, when you see the when Al gets up from the cliff, that's all like blue screen, dude. Like it's pretty funny. So then he goes regular scene to the cops, everything. And then him and all the cops just watch the lady in white's house burn. Mm-hmm. It starts to snow. And that's it.
They said it was going to snow, and it did.
So that's it, buddy. That's the story. Everything is okay now. We never had a trial for Phil. He just died off the cliffs.
Well, he died, yeah.
We don't know what happened to Richie's mom, if she got arrested or not.
Probably did.
The lady in the white, Melissa, they're off doing ghost stuff. Amanda, who's mad, finally got burnt in the house like she's been wanting to. Frank became an author and apparently is writing stories about killers and stuff. And he lives in Los Angeles. Geno, who knows what happened to him. So,
and he's writing books about the fog from the Star Wars Force.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. There you go.
The fog in the night.
Yeah. There you go. That makes sense. Maybe he's writing stories about his fog that was always around his house every time of year for some reason. So, but everybody, that has been the Lady in the White. It's not too bad. I can see why you liked it as a kid, though. I could see that.
I like this movie a lot. I even liked it when I was rewatching it now. I just maybe I'm watching it through like young adult eyes.
Yeah.
But I thought you would like this movie better than you did. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is a little padded, we'll say.
Yeah.
Hey, man, there are scenes that could have been cut out of it. Yeah. I feel like a lot of the length is made to show the passage of time, because it does take several months for him to solve this murder. And I feel like today that would all be condensed into like it would seem like he solved the murder in a week when it took him several months to do it in the movie.
Yeah,
but I see what you're saying. It is a little bit long, but yeah, I see where we're going with that.
It has some good stuff to it, so I would say. Mm-hmm. But everybody, thanks for joining us here on the Retro Blood. But we're gonna keep this train rolling. Because, like I said, this is Alison's picks for this month. Mm-hmm. Of 1980s ghost stories. Alison, what are we doing next week here on the Retro Blood?
Next week, we're going to go a little darker. Let's do The Entity with Barbara Hershey.
The Entity. Should be a fun one. And of course,
this is not a kid's movie.
And then on that episode, we will give you the full schedule for the full week or the full month over here on the Retro Blood. So, But everybody, thanks for joining us here on this edition of the Retro Blood. Starting it off with some forest ghost, some child murderers, some wild stuff here on the Retro Blood, just like always. All right, it's Lady in the White. Hope you all enjoyed it. Like I said, for all of our podcast listeners, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbeam,
we got it all.
Stitcher, that's still there, all of it. All right, give us a rating on there. Talk to us about how much you like this movie or didn't like this movie. If you have any recommendations, retroblood69@gmail.com. We will take some fan recommendations, and next month we actually have a fan one coming out, so that's going to be pretty exciting. And for all of our YouTube listeners, thanks for joining us on the videos. We appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the Retro Blood as we drop one of these episodes every Sunday.
We do.
Of course, we have a couple extra shows coming out. Lights Out is coming. We're doing a couple of those for the video for the first time. So a lot of cool stuff happening here on the Retro Blood. But like I said, like and subscribe on there. And Alison, because this is your month, what are we coming? What kind of rush song are we showing our podcast listeners?
Oh man, let's oh wow. So many we could choose. Let's do Marathon.
Marathon, brother.
Yeah.
Because boy, is it marathon watching this movie for 2 hours. Seeing Frankie go from a little kid to a slightly older kid, solving murder mysteries and writing about it and becoming rich. Kind of like that Donald Pleasant character on Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Somewhat, yes.
You know what I mean? Wrote all those stories about Michael became rich.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, actually, maybe what happened is Frankie, okay? Maybe if he wrote about this story, maybe he would have an angry fan saying, well, because you wrote this stories, you created this monster, so now I want to kill you.
That's like the sequel to this. That's Lady in White 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Melissa and her mom come back to help him.
Yeah, but they're more like Power Ranger characters now.
Right, yeah.
So, like, they have more, like, powers and stuff. Yeah,
and she can use her Raiden powers. They both have Raiden powers now.
Yeah, they both have it, yeah. Mm. And they fight the evil spirit of Phil.
Phil comes back.
Yeah. You could do it.
We could do it. We can make a sequel to this.
There you go, brother. I like it.
I wonder if Lucas Haas is available to be in it.
Yeah, he is. Pay him about, just pay his booking fee. Should be good to go.
Yeah, we should have that in the bank account. Retro Blood's bank account.
Exactly. All right, everybody. J.H. Alison, James Kline. We'll see you next week for The Entity. Later.
See you guys.